Thank you. So it's really beautiful to see like a lot of the experiences and inspirations now here in the book. And as a communist myself, I'm really grateful that you centered this book around class struggle. And being in Seattle today, I don't know if folks here are from Seattle, but it's just been pretty heavy. I think people are seeing the election results, and basically a few abolitionists were running for city council positions, and they got defeated by just law and order candidates. And one thing that has struck me about this conversation around class and how it plays out in our contemporary moment, in this conversation around abolition, is the definitions of public safety, right? And so much of Seattle, liberal Seattle, is happy to talk about race, but then cringe the moment you talk about private property. And so the people that they end up electing are the cops and the candidates that will define public safety as the defense of private property, rather than I think what a lot of us imagine public safety to be, which is the safety and well-being of working class people, and a lot of them homeless and displaced folks. And for me, one of the projects of doing the abolitionist work in the city, in the region, and also being a communist is also thinking about how do we bridge the language of abolition and the language of communism and class struggle. And one of the definitions that have really stood out to me is Ruthie Gilmore's definition of racism, when she says, racism is state-sanctioned vulnerability to premature death. And I'm someone who's trained in occupational health nursing and environmental health nursing. And for me, when I think of state-sanctioned vulnerability to premature death, I think of workers and occupational health hazards and places that people live, right? And which is obviously racialized, gendered, and how race, class, and all these identities that we have, we don't just leave behind the moment we clock out of work. We carry those health hazards with us when we go home and be with our families or walk the streets. So a few other things that came up to me in reading this book, I have to admit I have not finished it, but so I'm sorry, but a lot of the stuff that I have read does resonate with the projects that I feel like we have been part of. One of the central questions is, what does class unity look like? Is this still a worthwhile project? And I think this brings up the question of difference, and Calvin's question of centering class is, there's been so many failures of class unity where it's been class reductionist, and erasure of differences. Like, is that still a worthwhile project? And here in Seattle, one of the things that we have been trying to do is to, and for me as someone who is Chinese living in Seattle, is the way in which an entire, like I think a lot of Asian folks, an entire race has been given this like class identity, right, of like the model minority, of just this collapse of all the class differences within the Asian community into this middle class, upward mobility kind of class identity. And for me as someone who grew up in Asia and really seeing just, China, 1.3 billion people, factory of the world, and so much variety of class experiences. And as someone who organizes in Chinatown, and especially with massage parlor workers, just seeing the experiences of Chinese workers who are not articulated in mainstream media, who are not articulated in many Asian American circles as well, and thinking about what does it mean to have unity between working class Asians and Black folks who are fighting the prison industrial complex, right? And how do we come to terms with, and how do we analyze the different positions that we play within the capitalist system based on our nationality, race, gender, and geography? And that has been a project, I would say, in the last 7 to 10 years. In Seattle, we've been trying to build with workers in mainland, this is pre-COVID, and also people who are incarcerated behind in cages here in the US, and thinking of, what does it mean that here a lot of folks of color are seen as a surplus population? That's the role that people play in capitalism in the US versus the factory of the world. People in China, the working class in China, already being exploited, right? That's their main role in capitalism. And how do we overcome this siloing, this fragmentation of experiences? And I really am heartened by like the magic of working class interactions, like that people have different cultural connotations, different cultural experiences, which you alluded to in your presentation earlier. But I feel like when working class folks come together, there's just, I'm not trying to romanticize it, but in my experiences working as a nurse, as a CNA, in nursing homes, at Starbucks, it's just when you bring people together who are experiencing similar conditions under a really frustrating work schedule, there's a lot of unity and a lot of culture that's being created on the spot. Thank you for highlighting COVID and just how the experience has been for folks in the US and also globally. I think one of the ways in which COVID and class experiences has really struck me is just the gaslighting of all of us, right? But especially of workers. And I'll speak as a nurse of this, and let's Strikeover, there's a lot of nurses who are now out on strike, but this whole lifting up of nurses as these heroes who are helping the nation, valuing people's lives, whatever. And then that really stark contrast with the fact that we're not compensated materially. Our safety is not centered. And I work at Harborview. It's a major trauma one hospital in Seattle, and we just had our union contract, and it was a terrible contract. And it's really depressing because, yeah, the gaslighting of the cultural lifting up and valuing of our lives, but in actual material reality, just business as usual. The third thing that I wanted to highlight is, how do we imagine class struggle that in a way that doesn't fetishize commodified labor, that doesn't fetishize professional labor or craftsmanship? And I say that as someone who is participating in mutual aid work, participating and really witnessing a lot of spontaneous community responses to 911. These are folks in community who are just in relationship with people on the streets who have been houseless themselves, but they don't have a job category to label the kind of skills that they have, right? And so much of class struggle is often articulated through organization, through union affiliation, through your job category. And how do we value the labor of deprofessionalized everyday reproductive labor that's on the streets, right, that actually keep us safe? And that's something that's been really pertinent to me in terms of thinking about, post George Floyd, the conversations around alternatives to 911, and in this city, so much of the attention being focused on the city's infrastructure rather than thinking of grassroots existing community responses that are never valued, recognized, or resourced. That's what I'll end for right now. Yeah, thank you very much for listening.